Barbara Babcock became the first woman appointed to the regular faculty at Stanford University's law school in 1972, and later was the first woman to hold an endowed chair. In this oral history recorded for the American Bar Association's Women Trailblazers in the Law Project, she recalls her career, including her efforts at President Carter's request to help identify women for federal judgeships.
This is an interview with Professor Barbara Babcock for the Women Trailblazers in the Law Oral History Project of the American Bar Association Commission on Women in the Profession. We are in Professor Babcock's office at Stanford Law School in Stanford, California. Today is Tuesday, March 13th, 2007, and I am Ladaris Hazard Cordell. Professor Babcock, welcome and thank you.
It's good to be here.
So, why don't we start first with just a little bit of background. Where were you born and raised?
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C., which it's a very transient city, but that's where I was born, and I was raised for the first 5 or 6 years of my life in Arkansas, where my parents were from. My father was from Batesville, which is a little town in the Ozarks, and my mother was from Hope, Arkansas. And they met at Arkansas College, and then they came to Washington, D.C. during the Depression, where a lot of people from Arkansas came to get jobs in the government because there was nothing to do in Arkansas. And so, and I was born in 1938 in Washington, D.C. And then I grew up in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C., in a town. In my, later on, when I went to Yale Law School, I used to refer to Hyattsville as Hiatusville, which actually was a nice town to grow up in. But looking back on it, it seemed terribly 50s for a person who came of age in the 60s.
Are you an only child?
No, I'm the oldest of 3. And I have 2 brothers, one 15 months younger and one 10 years younger. And one's a lawyer. The one 10 years younger is a lawyer here in California.
Are you a product, and your brother's a product of public schools or private schools?
Public schools, all the way. And not only did we go to public schools, but we didn't really know there was anything else. I mean, like private schools were not an option. Everybody went to public schools, and that we knew. And I always talk about my high school, which was Northwestern High School in Hyattsville, Maryland. And it was, we really did. I graduated in 1956, and we thought we were in the best of times, in the very peak of the universe, the best school and the best place in the best world that could possibly exist. And then here's this funny thing that I really didn't realize it was a segregated school. There were no black people in our school. There were no brown people. There were no rich people. There were no poor people. It was just all the same white middle-class people, 1,500 of us.
A perfect world.
A perfect world. And then, but it never occurred to me. We won the high school basketball championship for the whole state. Now, how could we with an all-white team under 6 feet tall? The black kids weren't allowed in. The black schools weren't in. They had their own state championship where I'm sure they were playing quite a different game. But I had no idea that any of this outer world was going on at the time. No Jewish people in our school, see? I mean, it was just the most undiverse place that you can possibly imagine, our great, big, public high school.
And you were happy?
I was as happy as somebody can be in high school, you know.
Right, right.
As happy as you can be, you know, when you're too tall and have acne and all that kind of thing.
So what was your parents' attitude toward females moving forward, getting an education? You clearly went to college. Was it a given, or was this something unusual?
Well, no, I think that although my brother, who's 15 months younger than I am, didn't go to college. He graduated from high school and went directly into the Army and went to Korea. And but I just always assumed I was going to go to college. And I think my parents kind of assumed it too. But see, I kind of grew up without much supervision because I didn't need much. I think I was just so busy with my ideas about what I was going to do, and so but I had no notion of where to apply. See, most of the people in my high school, 50% of the people went to college, and of those, 90% went to the University of Maryland. So, just to branch out and apply to other places was unusual, and I just applied. Whenever I heard of a good college, I would just apply to it, see. And so this seems hard to believe, but that's the way it was. So I applied to these odd schools. I remember Cornell and Vanderbilt and Duke, and I would just send off these applications, and I see kids today, their parents carry them around, and they interview the schools and study it, and, and are counseled about it, but I just did, and then this man recruited me to go to the University of Pennsylvania, and that seemed really good to me, because it was not too far away, and it was, and then they gave me this scholarship, so I was just going to go to whatever school gave me the most money.
Well, you sound like you were very independent. Is this?
I really was, although I didn't think of myself as being independent. See, but my parents never stood in my way or gave me any advice, and I sometimes wanted advice or direction. But
were they the same with your brothers as well?
Yes, and they really were. It was. Looking back on it, I think it was unusual, but anyway, I got this incredible scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, for which I'm still grateful. I had a scholarship. I bet you didn't have as good a scholarship. Paid for everything.
No.
Paid for everything. Except books and travel back and forth to the school, and And as it turned out, Penn was a great place for me to go, because it was incredibly diverse, and it was urban. I was really in a suburban atmosphere. And
how did you take to the diverse environment?
I loved it.
You weren't shocked?
I really loved it. No, I wasn't shocked. I was excited. I thought, this is it. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. And it was very exciting. I especially I got into debating, which hadn't been available in my high school, and it was something I always wanted to do. And then I met my debate partner, was this brilliant Jewish man, and he was the first Jewish person I ever knew, and I fell in love with him.
You remember his name?
Oh, he was my first great love. But anyway, we were a great debate team, and I learned a lot about how to make an argument.
When did you know that law school was going to be next?
Well, I started early on saying I was going to be a lawyer.
When you say early on,
early on, like 7 or 8 years old,
and
because my dad was a lawyer, see, and my dad would come home. He was a great Southern storyteller from Arkansas, see, and I can still, just the other day, my brother David was out here from the East, and I had both my brothers and their wives and children over to brunch, and I was saying, do you remember how Star, one of my brothers is named Star, I said, you remember how Star used to get so mad at Dad because he would laugh at his own jokes? And then the wives and children of my brothers rose up all together and pointed at them and said, that's what he does. He laughs at his own jokes, but he would tell these wonderful long stories, and they were stories about being a lawyer, and the lawyer was always the helper and saved the day, but they were funny, and they would start, he would say, Barb, a lady came in the office today, and this was her problem. And then he would spin out some story, and then he would tell, like, his idea and how he fixed it. And so I just got this idea early on that being a lawyer was what I was going to do. So when people, people always ask children what they want to be when they grow up. And in the 50s, honest to God, nobody ever said a lawyer. No girl ever said a lawyer. I'm not sure any boy did either. But anyway, I started saying a lawyer, which was very well received. Everybody thought it was very cute. And in my junior high school yearbook, it says, ambition, lawyer, see. So it was always clear that I was going to be a lawyer.
So your last year or junior year at University of Pennsylvania, law school is next. And how do you choose? What do you do?
Well, I had been studying. Our debate coaches were in the law school, were guys from the law school. And so I went over and studied in the law library, which was near the dorm and near the other place I lived when I was in college. And so I used to study there. So I was always thinking I would go there because the library, and I liked, I was familiar with the building. I liked the feel of it. But then I went to this sort of pre-law lecture or something by a guy, and I don't even know who it was now, but he was from Yale, and he described Yale Law School and how it was small and how it had founded sociological jurisprudence and how it was a hotbed of legal realism, and I just thought, that's where I'll go to Yale. And it got that into my mind. Now looking back on it, I can't even believe it. And it's the only school I applied to. I applied to one law school, and it was Yale. And so that was, looking back on it, I mean, I certainly wouldn't advise anybody in their right mind to do that today. But and especially in those days, because they definitely had a quota on women. I mean, they had been taking women since 1895. Not particularly early point to admit women, but they had been taking a few women, and there were the same number of women in every class, 5 or 6 out of 175. So that there was a quota. But
at the time you applied, did you know there was a quota?
No. And if I had known, though, it wouldn't have stopped me. I would have just thought, well, just the way I used to think. Well, that won't apply to me. They'll take me. So,
quota or no, they're taking
quota
me.
Or no, I somehow, and I can't explain it, and in the hours we spent together, I hear you asking, and I've thought a lot about it. I don't know where I got all this confidence that I had in my youth.
Well, you clearly needed it as your career progressed. There's no question about it. So you enter Yale Law School. What year? 1960. And there are other women in the class?
There were. In our class, there were the most women that had ever been in any Yale Law School class.
How many women?
13. 13 out of 175, and there was a lot of grumbling about it. Women taking spots that men who had to support families needed. And there was a lot of talk about, some of the women had men's names, so that, and you didn't submit pictures at that point. I don't know if you do today or not, pictures with law school applications, but but there was a woman, for instance, named Battle Rankin, and everybody thought that the admissions committee must have thought that she was a man, but her name was Dorothy Battle Rankin, see, so, but anyway, we had 13 women.
So can you remember the names of any of your women classmates?
I really could name almost all of them, but, there were some famous people in the class, like Eleanor Holmes Norton was in our class, who's the, now the representative of the District of Columbia in the House, and she was the former Human Rights Commissioner in New York City, and was also